The great doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss, and Daniel Hayes stepped inside. He was a simple-looking man, nothing special about him at first glance. His hair was turning gray at the sides, and his brown eyes looked tired like someone who had seen too much in his life. He wore a plain dark suit, the kind any businessman on Earth might wear to an important meeting. But this was not Earth. This was Nexus Prime, the ancient space station that had served as the meeting place for alien civilizations for over 10,000 years. The chamber itself was enormous, stretching up so high that the ceiling disappeared into darkness. Strange lights glowed from the walls, living organisms that had been grown into the very structure of the building. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around a central platform, and in those seats sat beings from 47 different worlds. Daniel walked forward slowly, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He could feel their eyes on him, hundreds of alien gazes watching his every move. Some of those eyes were like his own, round and curious. Others were compound eyes made of thousands of tiny lenses. Some species had no eyes at all but sensed him in other ways, through heat or sound or vibrations in the air. The High Chancellor sat on the highest platform, looking down at the human with obvious disgust. His name was, and he was a creature standing nearly 8 feet tall. His body was covered in dark armor that was actually part of his own skeleton, grown from his flesh like the shell of a beetle. His mandibles clicked together as he watched Daniel approach, making a sound like knives being sharpened. They had ruled this sector of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were old when humanity was still living in caves, still learning to make fire. To them, humans were nothing more than insects themselves, annoying creatures that had somehow stumbled into space travel and now thought they deserved a place at the table of civilized species. Daniel stopped at the center of the chamber and looked up at the Chancellor. He showed no fear, no nervousness. He simply waited, as calm as a man waiting for a bus. In the upper galleries, Ambassador of the Dominion leaned forward in her seat. She was a beautiful creature by any standard, tall and graceful with blue-gray skin that shimmered with patterns of light. Her people were old allies of the, but had always been more curious about other species than most of her kind. She watched the human closely and noticed something that made her pause. The way he stood, the way his eyes moved around the room without seeming to move at all, the way he had positioned himself exactly in the center where he could see every exit at once. This was not the behavior of a simple diplomat. This was the behavior of someone who had spent a lifetime in dangerous places. The delegation, floating in their water-filled pods nearby, reached out with their telepathic abilities to probe the human's mind. They were a curious people, always seeking knowledge, and they wanted to understand this strange creature from the young world called Earth. But when they touched his thoughts, they found something unexpected. His mind was like a still lake on a windless day, perfectly calm on the surface. But beneath that surface, they sensed depths they could not reach, darkness they did not want to explore. The quickly, troubled by what they had found. Chancellor finally spoke, his voice translated instantly by devices worn by every delegate in the chamber. The Council recognizes the human delegation. You may speak your piece. Daniel inclined his head respectfully. Thank you, Chancellor. I come on behalf of the people of Earth to request fair treatment under galactic law. We have followed every rule, respected every boundary that was set for us. We ask only for the same rights that other young species have been granted. A murmur ran through the chamber. Everyone knew what Daniel was really asking for. Humanity wanted to expand, to settle new worlds, to grow beyond the tiny corner of space they had been allowed to occupy. And everyone knew they would never allow it. His mandibles spread in what might have been a smile among his people. The Council will consider your request, but I must remind you, human, that the Imperium has concerns about your species. You are young. You are aggressive. You breed quickly and spread like a disease wherever you go. These are not qualities we wish to encourage. Daniel's expression did not change. With respect, Chancellor, Those same words could describe any species in its early expansion phase. They themselves were once called aggressive by the elder races of their time. The chamber went silent. No one spoke to the Chancellor that way. No one reminded thee of their own humble beginnings. Eyes, all six of them, fixed on Daniel with cold hatred. You would do well to remember your place, human. Your species exists in this galaxy because we allow it. That can change. Daniel held the Chancellor's gaze without flinching. I understand, Chancellor. I am simply here to present our case. The Council will decide what is fair. Watched this exchange with growing interest. She had seen many diplomats stand in that chamber, representatives of young races seeking favor from their elders. Most of them cowered before agreeing to whatever terms were offered just to avoid conflict. This human was different. He showed respect, but he did not show fear. And in the world of galactic politics, that was a very dangerous thing. What did not know, what none of them knew, was the truth about Daniel Hayes. The classified files that existed in the most secure databases on Earth told a story that would have shocked every being in that chamber. For 40 years, Daniel had served in the darkest branch of Earth's military, a unit that officially did not exist. He had been sent to places where normal soldiers could not go, given missions that could never be acknowledged. He had killed more enemies than most soldiers saw in their entire careers, and he had done it so quietly that the universe never even knew he existed. Among those who knew his true history, he had a name. They called him the Reaper. The council session continued for several hours, with various species offering their opinions on the human petition. Most were neutral, unwilling to take sides between thee and the newcomers. A few, like the, expressed cautious support for humanity. Thee and their allies made it clear that they would block any expansion of human territory. As Daniel left the chamber that evening, he knew that the official negotiations would go nowhere. They had already decided to deny humanity's request, but he also knew that this was only the beginning. The real game was just starting, and Daniel Hayes had been playing games like this for longer than any of these aliens could imagine. He returned to his quarters and sat alone in the darkness, thinking about what was to come. He had hoped for a peaceful solution, but he had prepared for something else entirely. The thought they were dealing with a soft species, easily frightened and easily controlled. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. 3 days passed on Nexus Prime and nothing changed. Every morning, Daniel went to the council chamber and presented his arguments. Every afternoon, they blocked his proposals with legal tricks and political games. Every evening, he returned to his quarters knowing that tomorrow would be the same. The other delegates watched with a mixture of pity and amusement. They had seen this before, young species full of hope, thinking they could change the way things worked. They always won in the end. That was simply how the galaxy operated. On the morning of the 4th day, Daniel received a message. Chancellor wished to meet with him privately to discuss a possible compromise. The message said to come to a meeting room on the lower levels of the station, away from the main chamber. Daniel knew immediately that something was wrong. They did not compromise. They did not negotiate in private with species they considered inferior. But he also knew that refusing the invitation would give them an excuse to claim he was acting in bad faith. So he went, walking alone through the winding corridors of the ancient station. The lower levels of Nexus Prime were older than the upper sections, built in a time before the current council existed. The walls here were metal instead of living material, cold and gray, and covered with strange writings in languages that had been dead for. The lights flickered occasionally, and the air had a stale taste that spoke of recycling systems pushed beyond their intended. Daniel found the meeting room at the end of a long hallway. The door slid open at his approach, and he stepped inside. Chancellor was not there. Instead, Daniel found himself facing a squad of soldiers in full combat armor, their weapons already pointed at his chest. Behind them stood 5 mercenaries, massive creatures with gray skin and muscles like twisted steel cables. They were known throughout the galaxy as the most brutal fighters money could buy, savage warriors who enjoyed their work far too much. The door closed behind Daniel with a heavy clang. Commander Al of the Imperial Guard stepped forward. He was smaller than but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had killed many times and enjoyed every moment of it. His armor was decorated with symbols that represented his victories, and there were many of them. "Human," Al said, his mandibles clicking with pleasure. "You have been charged with crimes against the Imperium, specifically espionage and conspiracy against the state. You will confess to these crimes, and your confession will be used to expel humanity from the galactic community forever." Daniel stood very still, his hands at his sides. He looked at the soldiers surrounding him, counting them automatically. 12 in total, 7 and 5, all armed with plasma weapons and neural disruptors. The room had no windows and only one door, which was now locked behind him. "There has been no espionage," Daniel said calmly. "This is a violation of diplomatic immunity. The Council will not allow this." Al made a sound that might have been laughter. "The Council will never know. This room has no recording devices, no witnesses. You will confess, human, one way or another. My friends here are very good at making people talk." One of the mercenaries cracked his knuckles, the sound like breaking bones. He smiled, revealing teeth that had been filed to points. Daniel looked at Al with an expression that had not changed since he entered the room. "I am going to give you one chance. Order your soldiers to stand down and walk away. Do this now, and you will live. Continue on this path, and I will show you why my people learned to fear me long before we ever reached the stars." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Al began to laugh, a horrible clicking sound that echoed off the metal walls. The other joined in, and even the seemed amused. "You threaten us," Al said when he could speak again. "You are one human, unarmed, surrounded by the finest warriors in the galaxy. You have no power here." Daniel's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The diplomat was gone. What remained was something else entirely. "So be it," Daniel said quietly. Al raised his hand to give the order, "Seize him." The first mercenary lunged forward, a neural disruptor in his hand. These weapons caused unimaginable pain without leaving marks, perfect for torture. He was fast, faster than any human had a right to react to. But Daniel was faster. His hand shot out and caught this wrist, twisting it with a sharp motion that produced a wet snapping sound. The mercenary screamed as his arm bent at an angle it was never meant to bend, and the neural disruptor fell into Daniel's waiting hand. Daniel fired twice before anyone else could move. 2 soldiers dropped to the ground, their nervous systems overloaded by their own weapon. Then he was moving, flowing through the room like water, like shadow, like something that had no physical form at all. There were warriors bred for combat. They had fought on 1,000 worlds and killed countless enemies. They had never faced anything like Daniel Hayes. He broke the first mercenary's neck with a simple twist, using the momentum to spin behind the falling body as plasma bolts burned through the air where he had been standing. A second swung a massive fist at his head, and Daniel ducked under it, driving his elbow into the creature's throat with enough force to crush its windpipe. The soldiers were shouting now, trying to get clear shots without hitting their own allies. But Daniel never gave them the chance. He moved through them like death itself, using their bodies as shields, turning their weapons against each other. A plasma bolt caught him across the shoulder, burning through his suit and searing his flesh. He barely seemed to notice. His hand found a knife hidden in his belt, a small blade that should not have made it through the station's security scanners. It flew through the air and buried itself in his eye, dropping the mercenary like a puppet with cut strings. Al watched in horror as his soldiers died around him. This was impossible. This could not be happening. The human moved with a speed and precision that everything they knew about the species. Each movement was efficient, perfect, ending a life with no wasted energy. In 37 seconds, 11 soldiers and mercenaries lay dead or dying on the floor. Al backed against the wall, his compound eyes wide with terror. His weapon shook in his hands as he pointed it at the human approaching him. Daniel's suit was torn and burned, his shoulder bleeding from the plasma wound, but he walked forward as if nothing had happened. "What are you?" Al whispered. Daniel stopped a few feet away from the commander. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but his eyes held something ancient and terrible. "I am what your people created when you decided to make an enemy of mine," Daniel said. "I am the consequence of your arrogance. I am what waits in the darkness when civilizations like yours forget that even the smallest species can produce monsters." He reached out and took the weapon from Al's unresisting hands, as gently as taking a toy from a child. "You will live," Daniel continued. "You will tell your chancellor what happened here. You will tell him that humanity is not what he thinks, and you will pray that he is wise enough to listen." Daniel turned and walked toward the door, stepping over the bodies of the fallen. Behind him, Al slid down the wall, his mind trying and failing to process what he had witnessed. The Reaper had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. News traveled fast on Nexus Prime. Within hours of the incident, every delegation on the station knew what had happened in that basement room. A single human diplomat had killed 11 elite soldiers with his bare hands and a stolen weapon. The story spread through the corridors like fire, growing stranger with each telling. Some said the human had used dark magic. Others claimed he was some kind of machine wearing human skin. A few whispered that humanity had made a deal with ancient powers that should have stayed buried. The truth was somehow more terrifying than any of the rumors. The council chamber was in chaos when Daniel arrived the next morning. He walked through the great doors with his arm in a simple bandage, his burned suit replaced with a fresh one. His face showed no emotion, no sign of the violence he had committed just hours before. He might have been arriving for a routine meeting instead of walking into the center of a diplomatic storm. Chancellor was present this time, his massive form trembling with barely controlled rage. Commander Al stood beside him, his own injuries treated but his spirit clearly broken. The other delegates clustered around their leader, their mandibles clicking in agitation. "Murderer!" screamed as Daniel entered, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have committed an act of war against the Imperium. You will be executed, and your pathetic species will be driven from the stars." Daniel stopped at the center of the chamber and looked up at the Chancellor. "Your soldiers attempted to abduct and torture a diplomatic envoy. I defended myself, as any being has the right to do. If anyone has committed an act of war, it is you." The chamber erupted in noise, dozens of species arguing and shouting their opinions. Some supported the old allies who depended on their protection. Others seemed uncertain, disturbed by the violation of diplomatic protocols. A few watched Daniel with new interest, reassessing everything they thought they knew about humans. Ambassador sat in her usual place, her bioluminescent patterns shifting rapidly as she processed the situation. She had suspected there was more to the human diplomat than met the eye. She had not imagined anything like this. Raised his arms for silence, his authority still strong enough to quiet the chamber. "You expect us to believe that a single human killed 12 of our finest warriors in self-defense. This is absurd. This is impossible." "And yet it happened," Daniel replied. "Commander Al was there. He survived because I allowed him to survive. Ask him what he witnessed." All eyes turned to Al. The commander seemed smaller than before, diminished somehow. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The human speaks the truth. I watched him destroy my soldiers like they were nothing. I have never seen anything move so fast, strike so precisely. He was not fighting like a human. He was fighting like something that had spent its entire existence learning to kill. A murmur ran through the chamber. They did not lie about combat, not when their honor was at stake. For Al to admit defeat so openly was almost unheard of. Before could respond, a holographic display activated in the human section of the chamber. A woman's face appeared, silver-haired and stern, wearing the uniform of Earth's military command. Her name was Admiral Cole, and she had been waiting for this moment. "Chancellor," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "I am Admiral Cole of the United Earth Fleet. Before you make any decisions you will regret, there are some things you need to know about the man your soldiers tried to torture." Mandibles clicked in anger. "You have no standing here, human. This is a matter for the Council." "Then let the Council hear what I have to say." Admiral Cole's expression did not change. "The man standing before you is Ambassador Daniel Hayes, but that is only his most recent identity. For the past 40 years, he has served in Earth's Strategic Operations Division, a unit that does not officially exist. His record is classified beyond any level most governments can imagine." The holographic display shifted, showing documents covered in security markings. Numbers and statistics scrolled across the screen, translated instantly for every species present. 93 successful operations on 17 worlds, confirmed enemy eliminations numbering in the hundreds, infiltrations of hostile organizations that were supposed to be impossible to penetrate, assassinations of targets protected by armies. Admiral Cole let the information sink in. "Your people have a concept called the Ascended Warrior, Chancellor. Those who have killed more than 100 enemies in personal combat are treated as living legends among the—" Daniel Hayes reached that number before he was 30 years old. He continued for another 20 years after that. The chamber fell silent, even seemed to have lost the ability to speak. "Among those who know his true history," Admiral Cole continued, "he is called the Reaper. He is not just a diplomat, Chancellor. He is the most dangerous human being alive. And you try to put him in a room with 12 soldiers and torture him into a false confession." Found his voice at last. "This changes nothing. He killed soldiers. He must face justice." "Justice?" Admiral Cole's voice turned cold. "Your soldiers violated diplomatic immunity. They attempted to kidnap and torture an envoy under false pretenses. Under galactic law, Ambassador Hayes had every right to defend himself by any means necessary. If you want to talk about justice, Chancellor, let us discuss the investigation into conduct that several delegations are now demanding." Stood, her tall form drawing attention from across the chamber. "The Dominion supports this investigation. What they attempted was a violation of the most basic principles of galactic diplomacy. We move to censure the Imperium and demand a full accounting of their actions." Other voices rose in agreement. The who had sensed the darkness in Daniel's mind now understood what they had felt. The who could see life energies watched the human with something approaching awe. Even species that had traditionally allied with the began to distance themselves from the Chancellor's actions. Looked around the chamber and realized he was losing control. The attack on the human had been meant to intimidate humanity into submission. Instead, it had exposed the as aggressors and revealed that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had believed. "This is not over," hissed at Daniel. "The Imperium has a long memory. We will not forget this humiliation." Daniel looked up at the Chancellor with those same calm brown eyes. "Neither will we, Chancellor. And when you are considering your next move, remember this. I am not unique among my people. Earth has produced thousands like me throughout its history. Warriors, soldiers, survivors who learn to fight and kill in ways you cannot imagine. The next human you meet might be a farmer or a teacher or a scientist, or they might be something else entirely. You will never know until it is too late." The chamber dissolved into heated discussion as various delegations argued about what should be done. This reputation had been damaged, perhaps permanently. Humanity, once seen as a minor species barely worth noticing, had suddenly become a topic of intense interest throughout the galaxy. Daniel stood quietly in the center of it all, waiting. The battle was not over, not by a long way, but the first shots had been fired and humanity had proven something important. They were not prey. They were not victims. They were predators wearing the masks of civilized beings. And the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant. 1 week had passed since the incident in the basement room. 1 week of investigations, arguments, and secret negotiations behind closed doors. The had tried everything to save face, claiming that Commander Al had acted alone, that the Chancellor had no knowledge of the plot against the human diplomat. No one believed them, but political games required such lies to be told. Daniel spent the week in his quarters, receiving visitors and answering questions from the investigation committee. His shoulder healed quickly, faster than the doctors expected. They did not know about the genetic enhancements that had been given to him decades ago, modifications that made him stronger, faster, and more durable than any normal human. These secrets would remain his own. Ambassador visited him on the third day. She came alone, without guards or assistants, which was unusual for someone of her rank. Daniel welcomed her into his quarters and offered her a seat. "I wanted to speak with you privately," said, her bioluminescent patterns showing colors that Daniel had learned to associate with curiosity and respect, away from the politics and the performances. Daniel nodded and sat across from her. "What would you like to know?" "The truth, if you are willing to share it," studied him with her large, intelligent eyes. "My people have a saying, the deepest waters hide the strongest currents. I sensed something unusual about you from the first moment you entered the council chamber. Now I understand what it was, but I still do not understand why." "Why what?" "Why you chose diplomacy. Why someone with your abilities would spend years negotiating with species who look down on you, when you could simply have taken what you wanted by force." Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. "Because I have seen what force does to people, to both sides of a conflict. I spent 40 years killing Ambassador. I was very good at it, but every death left a mark on me, even the ones that were necessary. I reached a point where I had to choose, continue being a weapon or try to become something else." "So you became a diplomat." "I tried to. The skills I learned in my previous life turned out to be useful in unexpected ways. Reading people, understanding their motivations, predicting how they would react. These things work in negotiation rooms as well as battlefields." Daniel smiled slightly. "I hoped I would never have to use the other skills again." His patterns shifted to deeper colors. "And now that you have." "Now I remember why I stopped. Killing comes too easily to me, Ambassador. It feels too natural. That scares me more than any enemy ever could." They sat in silence for a while, two beings from different worlds sharing a moment of understanding. Finally, rose to leave. "My people will support humanity in the council vote," she said. "Not because we fear you, but because we respect what you are trying to become. The galaxy needs more species that choose peace when they could choose war." Daniel stood and inclined his head. "Thank you, Ambassador. That means more than you know." The final council session came at the end of the week. The chamber was packed, every delegation present to witness the verdict. Chancellor was notably absent, having returned for what was officially called a medical emergency. His replacement, a more moderate named sat in the Chancellor's place. Daniel entered the chamber alone, as he had on the first day. But everything had changed since then. The delegates who had once looked at him with contempt now watched with careful attention. Species that had never bothered to learn about humanity were suddenly very interested in this strange race from a small blue planet. Arose to address the assembly. His voice was calmer than his manner more diplomatic. The Council has reached a decision regarding the territorial dispute between humanity and the Imperium. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony, the Council finds that humanity's petition for expanded territorial rights is reasonable and in accordance with galactic law. The petition is approved. A wave of surprised murmurs swept through the chamber. The never backed down, never gave ground. But the evidence against them was too strong, and they had lost too much support among the other species. They had no choice but to accept defeat. Furthermore, continued, the Council condemns the actions taken against the human delegation. While no formal sanctions will be imposed at this time, the Imperium acknowledges that diplomatic immunity was violated and expresses regret for the incident. Daniel accepted the decision with a simple nod. He knew this was not a real apology, just words spoken to satisfy political requirements. They would remember this humiliation, and they would seek revenge eventually. But for now, humanity had won. After the session ended, Daniel walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime one last time. He passed delegates from dozens of species and noticed how they moved aside to let him pass. Word had spread far beyond the station. Throughout the galaxy, beings were learning about the human diplomat who had killed 12 soldiers with his bare hands. He found waiting for him near the docking bay, where his ship was preparing to depart. "You are leaving?" she asked. "My work here is done. Earth will send a new ambassador to handle the follow-up negotiations, someone better suited for the job." Tilted her head slightly. "Better suited after what you accomplished." "I accomplished violence, Ambassador. That is not the same as accomplishing peace." Daniel looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. Humanity needs representatives who can build relationships, not ones who destroy enemies. My presence here would only remind everyone of what happened. That is not the foundation for lasting cooperation. You are wiser than your years would suggest. Daniel smiled, a rare expression that made him look almost kind. I am older than I look, in experience if not in years. They stood together watching the stars for a few moments. Ships moved through the blackness, carrying beings to and from 1,000 different worlds. The galaxy was vast and ancient, filled with wonders and horrors beyond counting. Humanity was just beginning to find their place in it. "What will you do now?" asked. "I have a house on Earth in the mountains. I have been away from it for too long." Daniel turned to face her. "I am going to sit on my porch and watch the sun rise. I am going to read books and tend my garden. I am going to try to remember what it feels like to be just a man, not a weapon." "And if your people need you again?" Daniel was silent for a moment. "Then I will answer. That is the burden I carry, Ambassador. I cannot escape what I am, no matter how much I might wish to, but I can choose when to use it, and I choose to use it only when all other options have failed." Reached out and touched his arm, a gesture of respect in her culture. "Then I hope you find the peace you are seeking, Daniel Hayes, and I hope we meet again in better circumstances." "So do I, Ambassador, so do I." Daniel walked to his ship and did not look back. Behind him, the great station of Nexus Prime continued its endless orbit, carrying the representatives of 47 civilizations in their eternal dance of politics and power. Humanity was now a part of that dance, accepted as equals at last. But the galaxy would not forget the price of that acceptance. The story of the human diplomat would spread to every corner of known space, and everywhere it went, beings would remember the lesson it taught. Never underestimate the children of Earth. 6 months had passed since Daniel Hayes returned to Earth. The galaxy had changed in ways both small and large during that time. Treaties that had been stalled for decades suddenly moved forward. Trade agreements that seemed impossible were signed and sealed. Species that had ignored humanity for years now sent ambassadors seeking friendship and alliance. The Imperium had withdrawn from human-occupied space entirely. Their fleets, once a constant presence along Earth's borders, had pulled back to their own territory. No official explanation was given, but everyone knew the truth. They were afraid, not of Earth's military, which was still small compared to the ancient empires. They were afraid of what else might be hiding behind those calm human faces. On Nexus Prime, a new human ambassador had taken Daniel's place. Her name was Lisa Park, and she was everything Daniel was not. Young, cheerful, quick to smile and slow to anger. She had no military training, no secret history of violence. She was simply a skilled diplomat who genuinely believed in the power of communication and understanding. The other delegates watched her carefully, searching for signs of the monster that had been revealed in Daniel Hayes. They found nothing. Lisa was exactly what she appeared to be, a friendly young woman who wanted to make friends and build bridges between worlds. But that uncertainty was precisely what made humanity dangerous now. Every human might be hiding the soul of a warrior. Every smile might conceal a killer's instincts. The galaxy could never be sure, and that doubt was more powerful than any fleet of warships. Admiral Cole visited Daniel at his mountain home 3 months after his return. She arrived in a civilian transport, wearing simple clothes instead of her uniform. This was not an official visit. Daniel met her on the porch of his small house, where he had been sitting and watching the morning mist rise from the valley below. The mountains stretched away in every direction, green and ancient and peaceful. It was hard to believe that somewhere beyond those peaks, humanity was spreading across the stars. "You look well," said, settling into the chair beside him. "Better than I expected, honestly." "The mountains are good for the soul." Daniel handed her a cup of coffee, black and strong. "How is the universe treating you?" "Busy. Everyone wants to talk to humanity now. We have more diplomatic requests than we can handle." She sipped her coffee and smiled. "You really stirred things up out there." "That was not my intention." "I know, but the result is the same. They are backing down on every front. Other aggressive species are taking notice. We have gained more ground in 6 months than we did in the previous 50 years. Looked at him seriously. "You changed everything, Daniel, whether you meant to or not." Daniel stared out at the mountains, his face unreadable. "I killed 11 beings. I took their lives because they threatened mine. That is not something to celebrate." "No, but it is something to acknowledge. Those beings were trying to destroy humanity's place in the galaxy. They were trying to torture you into betraying your own people. You stopped them." Set down her cup. "I know you struggle with what you are, Daniel. I know you wish you could be something else. But the truth is, humanity needs people like you. Not often, and hopefully not again for a long time. But when all other options fail, when diplomacy and negotiation cannot solve the problem, someone has to be willing to do what is necessary." "And what happens when that someone loses themselves in the doing?" Daniel's voice was quiet. "I have seen it happen. Good people who became monsters because they could not stop killing. I feel that darkness inside me every day. It would be so easy to let it take over. But you have not let it. That is the difference." Reached out and touched his hand. "You chose to walk away. You chose peace when you could have chosen war. That makes you stronger than any of the people I have known who gave in to that darkness." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, two old friends who had seen too much and understood each other without needing words. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing the full beauty of the mountain landscape. "There is one more thing," said eventually. "A message came through diplomatic channels from the Dominion. Ambassador asked me to deliver it personally." She handed Daniel a small device. He activated it, and a holographic message appeared, showing graceful form and shifting patterns. "To the human called Hayes," his recorded voice said. "The Dominion remembers those who shape history. Your actions on Nexus Prime will be remembered for generations, not just among humans but among all the species of the galaxy. You showed us that strength and wisdom can exist together, that a warrior can also be a peacemaker. May your remaining years be peaceful and may your legacy endure. You have earned the rest. With respect and gratitude." Daniel watched the message twice before turning off the device. His expression had not changed, but could see something in his eyes that might have been emotion. "She understands you," said, "better than most. She understands what I am trying to be. That is enough." Daniel set the device aside and returned his gaze to the mountains. "I never wanted to be a legend. I just wanted to protect my people." "That is exactly why you became one." A year later, the story of Daniel Hayes had spread to every corner of the known galaxy. It was told in council chambers and military academies, in trading posts and diplomatic schools. The details changed with each telling, growing more elaborate and more fantastic. Some versions had him killing 100 soldiers. Others claimed he had supernatural powers granted by ancient human gods. But the core of the story remained the same. A human diplomat, underestimated by those who thought they knew what humans were capable of, had revealed the truth in a moment of violence that shocked the galaxy. Humanity was not a weak species stumbling through space. They were survivors, fighters, beings who had clawed their way to sentience through millions of years of competition and struggle. And somewhere among them, hiding in plain sight, were warriors like Daniel Hayes, the reapers who emerged only when their people truly needed them, the monsters who wore human faces and loved their families and tended their gardens, until the day someone made the mistake of threatening what they held dear. Daniel never returned to space. He lived out his remaining years in his mountain home, growing older and finding something like peace. Visitors came occasionally, old friends from his former life, curious officials who wanted to meet the legend. He received them politely and sent them away without confirming or denying the stories they had heard. When he finally died, quietly in his sleep at the age of 87, the news spread across the stars within hours. The Dominion declared a day of mourning. The new chancellor sent a message of respect that surprised everyone who received it. Throughout the galaxy, beings who had never met Daniel Hayes paused to remember the human who had changed everything. On Earth, a simple ceremony was held in the mountains where he had lived. His ashes were scattered in the valley below his home, returned to the planet that had made him. No monument was built, no statue erected. That was how he would have wanted it. But his legacy lived on in ways more lasting than stone or metal. Every time an aggressive species considered attacking humanity, they remembered the story. Every time a human diplomat entered a negotiation, their counterparts wondered what might be hiding behind that friendly smile. The fear that Daniel had created was humanity's greatest shield, protecting them far more effectively than any weapon. The children of Earth continued to spread among the stars, building colonies, making alliances, becoming a part of the great tapestry of galactic civilization. They were accepted now, respected, even admired by some. The days of being dismissed as a minor species were over forever. And in the stories told around campfires on 100 different worlds, the name of Daniel Hayes lived on. The diplomat who had been death incarnate, the warrior who had chosen peace, the reaper who had protected his people and then walked away. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. Humanity had opened such a door on Nexus Prime, revealing what they truly were, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had learned that day. Never threaten the children of Earth, because you never know which one might be the next reaper waiting to be awakened.